All right, so I just thought that I was on mute this whole time. All right, so 1.5 quadratic equations. This is our general form, ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. Main difference between this and what we've done up to this point are linear equations. In this case, we're going to get two solutions because we have a second degree polynomial. Highest degree is 2. So we should be getting two solutions. Before we received 1, now we're getting 2. All right. And of course, if I move up too quickly, let me know. I wonder why my chat's not opening. All right, so we have 4 methods in which we will be using to solve quadratic equations. First one is the zero factor property. Second one, square root property. Third, completing the square. And then fourth, quadratic formula. So all 4 of those methods will be in this section. All right, the first one is zero factor property. So the first 2 words give you a hint as to how you're going to be able to solve, or how you're going to use, or what you're going to use to solve in order to implement this property. Is that 0, so that means 0 has to be involved. 0 has to be on one side of the equation, and then you're going to factor in order to be able to solve. So also take note or keep in mind that this section has 4 methods. That means it's only a quarter of this section that actually discusses factoring. So they're not sitting in this section with the idea that you don't know how to factor. So if you need help with factoring, or you haven't seen factoring in a while, make sure you get with me outside of class, or you just want to see a video of someone discussing factoring. I have videos in which I've taught factoring before, but this section does not set you up to be taught factoring. It's assuming you already know how to factor. So just keeping that in mind. So if a times b is equal to 0, then a is equal to 0, b is equal to 0, or both. So when we look at our example here, x plus 5 times x plus 2, that's the scenario we want. That's after you factored. You have x plus 5 times x plus 2. Once you have that, then that means you can set x plus 5 equal to 0, x plus 2 equal to 0, then solve for x, and you'll have your 2 solutions. So our goal, with my, oh, there were my pens. Goal is to go ahead and factor to get to this scenario. We want to factor completely. Once we factor completely, we can set each piece equal to 0 and then solve. All right. So the first one, we have 4x squared minus 2x equal to 0. So we want to factor as much as possible. So what I did here was I factored out 2x at a GCF, greatest common factor of 2x. And that left me with 2x minus 1 in the parentheses. So after that, I would set each part equal to 0 and then solve. So in this first one, that means I would divide both sides by 2. At 2x equal to 0, divide both sides by 2. 2's cancel, and x is equal to 0. And then in the next one, 2x minus 1 equal to 0. Add 1 to both sides, then divide by 2. Your other solution would be x equal to half. Any questions? All right, the next one, 2x squared plus 7x equal to 4. And first thing we need to do is set one side equal to 0. And so we'll subtract 4 from both sides of our equation. So that's what I did down here. Minus 4. And the 4 cancels on the right. And that'll leave me with 2x squared plus 7x minus 4, and that's equal to 0. So now you want to factor this trinomial. And so there are factoring rules in place. Remembering that if this sign is in the back, if it's minus, that means our signs will be different inside of our parentheses. All right. And so both of our signs will be different in our parentheses. And when you look at 2x, the factors of 2x is just 2x times, well, 2x squared. Factors of 2x squared would be 2x times x. And that's what happens in our first term in each parentheses. Then in the back, we have 4, and we have the option of using 1 times 4 or 2 times 2. So I use 1 and 4. And remember, you can always check by taking your distribution or your binomials and distributing them. And it should give you what you originally had, that 2x squared plus 7x minus 4. If you don't get that, then that means you don't have the correct factorization. So you can always check your factorization to make sure that it is the right one. And if you were to FOIL that out, you will get 7x in the middle. Once you've established that you have the correct factorization, go ahead and set each piece equal to 0 and solve. So 2x minus 1 equal to 0. Add 1 to both sides, divide by 2. That'll be 1/2. And then subtract 4 from both sides. X equal to negative 4. All right, questions on that one? All right, don't forget, if I scroll up too fast and you're still copying, let me know. All right, so the next one, x squared minus 13x plus 36 equal to 0. So x squared, the factors of x squared, just be x times x. So that's why you have x and x in our parentheses. This plus sign back here lets us know that both of our signs will be the same. Minus sign in the front lets us know both of them should be minus. And then I need factors of 36 that will come together and give me that 13 in the middle. So we're looking at our factors of 36, 136, 218, 3 and 12, and then 4 and 9. So it's the 4 times 9 that will multiply to give us the 36, and then add together to give it 13. And so that's why I got x minus 4, x minus 9. And then set each part equal to 0. X is equal to 4 and x is equal to 9. All right, any questions? We'll do one more, make sure we're good. All right, so the next one, 9x squared plus 9x equal to negative 2. Once again, we want to set one side equal to 0. Add 2 to both sides in order to do so. And that'll be 9x squared plus 9x plus 2 equal to 0. So now we want to factor that. And once again, we have a plus sign in the back. So that means both of our signs should be the same. And then this plus sign in the front. lets us know that both of them should be positive. So now when I look at my factors of 2, the only choice I have is 1 times 2, so that's what goes in the back. And then as far as 9 is concerned, we have 1 times 9 and 3 times 3. So I chose 3x and 3x to give me my 9x squared. Then you would check, and I went ahead and did the foiling out here. 3x times 3x, of course, give me 9x squared. 3 times 2 give me 6x. 1 times 3x is 3x. 1 times 2 is 2. And then you notice you get your 9x plus 3x in the middle. 6x plus 3x in the middle, which is what we wanted to give us 9x. And that gives us our trinomial, original trinomial. So since we know we have the correct factorization, we can go to say each part equal to 0. 3x plus 1 equal to 0. 3x plus 2 equal to 0. Solving for x. And we have our 2 solutions. So before we go to the next method, questions on the zero factor property. All right. All right, so the second method, the zero factor property, not zero factor property, excuse me, the square root property, says if u squared is equal to d, then u is equal to the square, to plus or minus square root of d. All right. So if I have x squared plus 25, so you may ask why we're doing the plus or minus square root of d. So don't forget, whenever you're looking at an equation, x squared equal to 25, you want to know what values of x will make that a true statement. So what times itself twice will give me 25, and that will be positive 5, which is 5 times 5, and also negative 5, which is 5 times 5. Both of them will multiply together to give you 25, the positive and negative 5. So when you go to take the square root of x squared in order to get x by itself, the square and square root cancel on the left, and you do x equal to plus or minus square root of 25, and that will give us those solutions of plus or minus 5. And remember, you always can go back and check by plugging them into your original equation. So whenever you're taking the square root of both sides in order to solve, you have to use plus or minus on the side that it didn't cancel out. Questions before scrolling up? Everybody good? All right, so our next one is 9x squared plus 25 equal to 0. So we want to get whatever being squared, in this case it's just x, we want to get that by itself. So we'll minus 25 from both sides. And that'll leave us with 9x squared equal to negative 25. Divide by 9. And that will give us x squared equal to negative 25 over 9. Now, since we have x squared on one side by itself, we take the square root of both sides. Take the square root of both sides. X is equal to plus or minus square root of negative 25 over 9. What's going on right here? Then the square root of negative 25 over 9 is 5i over 3. So your answer is plus or minus 5i over 3.
Can you explain? I mean, I kind of get where the I comes from, but I kind of need a refresher on like why you put the I.
Yep. So whenever you're taking the square root of a negative, whenever you have the negative under the radical, the result is going to be whatever that number is, I. So in other words, the square root of 25 is 5, so it's going to be 5i.
Okay, thank you.
Not a problem. All right, questions? Any questions? I scroll up. Good, okay. All right, so the next one is x minus 2 squared equal to 6. So this time we have this quantity is being squared. So we take the square root of both sides in order to get the square off of that quantity. So that'd be x minus 2 equal to plus or minus square root of 6. Don't forget, whenever you take the square root of both sides, plus or minus have to be involved. So that's x minus 2 equal to plus or minus square root of 6. Now you add 2 to both sides. And x is equal to 2 plus or minus square root of 6. So my math lab, I don't believe have a plus or minus symbol. So I believe you have to write them out like we have over here. 2 plus square root of 6 and 2 minus square root of 6. All right. Questions on that one? All right, so the next one, x plus 4 squared equal to 81. Yeah. So take the square root of both sides. So that square and square root can cancel, leaving you with just x plus 4 on the bottom. And then don't forget, whenever you take the square root of both sides, that's plus or minus on the other side that you weren't canceling out the square. So it's plus or minus square root of 81. So now we have x plus 4 is equal to plus or minus 9. Square root of 81 is 9. Then we'll minus 4 from both sides. And that'll give us x equal to negative 4 plus or minus 9. So have to be careful here because remember in our last one, we could leave it as plus or minus, or 2 plus or minus square root of 6. But here we don't have that luxury because you can add 4 and 9 together. So they would be expecting you to do so. So negative 4 plus 9 is 5. Negative 4 minus 9 is negative 13. questions? Any questions? All right. Okay. So here's our third method, completing the square. So to solve ax squared plus bx equal to c equal to 0, go ahead and erase that. If a is not equal to 1, so we're talking about a, we're talking about this first term right here. If that's not equal to 1, first coefficient, then divide both sides by a, or in other words, divide each term by a. Second step, isolate c to one side of the equation. Also, if you had to see that, if you're just talking about generically, that'd be a squared ax squared plus bx equal to c. You want to put c on the other side of the equation. Then we'll take half of your b term and square it. After you've done that, you'll add the result to both sides of the equation. Step 4, factor the perfect square trinomial, and then simplify the other side. Step 5, you're going to solve using the square root property. And step 6 is check. All right, questions before we actually try this out? All right, can I scroll up? All right, so first one, we have x squared minus 6x plus 4 equal to 0. So the first step, we will only implement it if a is not equal to 1. In this case, a is equal to 1. It's right here. The leading coefficient is 1, so there's nothing to do. Step 2, we want to isolate our constant, so we subtract 4 to both sides. And that'll leave us with x squared minus 6x equal to negative 4. All right. Next step, we're going to look at our b term, which is negative 6. Take half of negative 6 and then square it. So half of negative 6 is negative 3. Negative 3 squared is 9. And then we take that 9 and add it to both sides of the equation. Okay. So then step 4 is to factor the trinomial and then simplify the other side. The other side we have -4 plus 9, so that's 5. And then with the left side, you're talking about factoring. If you have any trouble with factoring, always remember that whatever half your B term was, will be what goes down here with your factorization. And it's supposed to work that way. So x minus 3 squared would be your factorization. We have -3 over here as half of that -6. So whatever half your B term is what go in there as far as your factorization is concerned. All right. Questions? Any questions? So we have x minus 3 squared equal to 5. Take the square root. I think I want purple. Take the square root of both sides so we can get the square off of x minus 3. All right. Then we would have x minus 3 equal to plus or minus square root of 5. So now we will add 3 to both sides. And our result is 3 plus or minus square root of 5. All right. Questions before we do another one using that method? All right. So we're good to go. All right. So the next one, 9x squared minus 6x minus 4 is equal to 0. So this time a is equal to 9. So we need to get 9 off of x squared by dividing each term by 9. And so that's what I did here. Divided each term by 9. So 9's cancel in that first term. Then we have 6 over 9, 4 over 9, and 0 over 9, which would be 0, of course. And that will be the result once you simplify. X squared minus 2/3 x minus 4/9 equal to 0. All right. Now we want to take our constant to the other side. So we have x squared minus 2/3 x minus 4/9 equal to 0. We add 4/9 to both sides. That's x squared minus 2/3 x equals 4/9. Any problems? Any problems? All right, so the third step is we're going to take half of our b term and square it. So half of -2/3 squared. So half of -2/3 is -1/3. And then squaring -1/3 is 1/9. right, then we add the 1/9 to both sides. So it's x squared minus 2/3 x plus 1/9 equal to 4/9 plus 1/9. Any questions? All right, so step 4 is to factor the trinomial and then to simplify the other side. So 4/9 plus 1/9 on the right side is 5/9. On the left side, remember I said before, if you have any trouble with factoring that trinomial, what is supposed to happen is that whatever half of your b term was is what goes down there into your factorization. So our b term, half of it anyway, was this negative 1/3. And so that's why we have x minus 1/3 down here. So x minus 1/3 squared equal to 5/9. All right, very good. So now we take the square root of both sides. Square and square root cancel on the left, leaving you with just x minus 1/3. Then on the right, don't forget, once again, plus or minus, whenever you take the square root of both sides, plus or minus has to be involved. Then if you look over here, take the square root of the top and bottom, square root of 5, you would just leave that as is, and then the square root of 9 is 3. So that's x minus 3 equal to plus or minus square root of 5 over 3. All right, so then we look to finish it off by adding 1/3 to both sides. 1/3 is canceled on the left. Then on the right, we can't add it completely together because of that 1/5. I mean, that square root of 5. So that'd be 1/3 plus or minus square root of 5 over 3. Or if you want to put them together because you have this common denominator of 3, you can do 1 plus or minus square root of 5 over 3. So either one of those answers would be fine. All right. Questions before we look at the last method in this section? All right. Scrolling up. All right. Quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula, you can actually use this method no matter what quadratic or type of quadratic equation you get. If you're not comfortable with factoring, you'll always be able to use quadratic formula. If you're not comfortable with the completing the square, you can use the quadratic formula. So as long as your equation is in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0, so in other words, you need to set one side equal to 0. Once you've done that, you can pick out what a, b, and c are and plug them into the formula, which is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So as long as you have one side set equal to 0, you can go ahead and do that. If not, make sure you set it equal to 0 first, and then go ahead and plug in to the equation, to the formula. So first problem, if I have x squared, 8x squared plus 2x equal to 1, and I want to solve by using the quadratic formula, the first thing I would do is subtract 1 from both sides. I need to set one side equal to 0, as I mentioned before. So the 1's cancel on the right, and that'll leave me with 8x squared plus 2x minus 1 equal to 0. Once I have one side equal to 0, I can establish what a, b, and c are. A is in front of x squared, which is 8. B is in front of x, which is 2. And then -1 is c, which is our constant. All right, so we have negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So always make sure you hold true to what you're plugging in. Make sure you don't lose negatives and all that stuff like that. So we have a minus for that negative, and then we have 2. So I'll plug in 2 here. Plus or minus 2 squared minus 4 times 8 times -1 over 2 times 8. So 2 squared, I'm under the radical. 2 squared is 4. -4 times 8, which is -32, times -1, which is +32. Then on bottom, 2 times 8 is 16. 4 plus 32, excuse me, is 36. Square root of 36 is 6. And then since I can add 2 and 6 together, nothing stopping me, like imaginary or radicals, I will go ahead and do so. So -2 plus 6 over 16, -2 minus 6 over 16. So the first one would be 4 over 16, which reduces to 1/4. -2 minus 6 would be -8 over 16, which would be -1/2. Questions? Any questions? All right, let's do it again. Should be the last one, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. All right, so 3x squared minus 2x plus 4 equal to 0. We already have one side set equal to 0. So we're good to go there. That means a is equal to 3, b is equal to -2, c is equal to 4. All right. So make sure you don't lose a negative when you go and do your distribution. So in our formula, we have a negative on the outside, but we also have a negative that needs to be substituted in with this -2. I mean, with this 2. And so a lot of times people will make a mistake and leave off one of those negatives. So make sure you're careful there. So that's -2 plus or minus -2 squared minus 4 times 3 times 4 over 2 times 3. So right here, -4 times 3 times 4 is -48. And then on bottom, 2 times 3 is 6. Also, I didn't mention, but negative to a negative right here turns positive when you go to simplify. So that's 2 plus or minus 4, the square root of 4 minus 48 over 6. Under the radical, 4 minus 48 is -44. Now you can break up that -44 in this fashion right here. You break it up into -4 times 11. Take the square root of -4, which is 2i. Leave the 11 under the radical. All right. Then take 6 and divide it into each term. So that's 2 over 6 plus or minus 2i, square root of 11 over 6. And if you reduce it, that'll be 1/3 plus or minus I square root of 11 over 3. All right, so before we still have a few minutes before we touch on something else, questions on what we did here. Very good, right straight. All right, so 1.6, we'll do a few problems in 1.6 and then call it a night. All right, so the first problem, 3x to the fourth equal to 27x squared. So notice that x to the fourth is our highest exponent for our variable, so we should be getting 4 solutions here. We set one side equal to 0 in order to be able to solve. And that 27x squared will cancel. You notice in 1.6 we're going to talk about other types of equations, so going beyond x squared or our quadratic equations. So when we subtract 27x squared from both sides, that'll give us 3x to the fourth minus 27x squared equal to 0. All right. So we can factor out a GCF of 3x squared, and that'll leave us with x squared minus 9 in our parentheses. And what we have in our parentheses is the difference of squares, and that's leaning on this formula right here. X squared minus y squared is going to be equal to x plus y, x minus y. And that 9 is 3 squared. So that's what we're talking about. We have x squared minus 3 squared. And so x squared minus 9 gives us those two quantities. So now we have 3x squared, x plus 3, x minus 3 equal to 0. All right, so once we factor it out completely, we'll say each part equal to 0. So if we say each part equal to 0, we have 3x squared equal to 0. If I were to divide both sides by 3, that's what I did here. That 3 will cancel, leave you x squared equal to 0. Take the square root of both sides, and we'll get plus or minus 0. And of course, you can only have 0. So we actually have a repeated solution here of 0. So that would actually be 2 of our solutions. Remember, I mentioned that you should get 4. So right here, we have a repeated solution of 0. And then when we look at the other two, x plus 3 equals 0 will be x equal to negative 3, and then x minus 3 equal to 0 will be x equal to 3. So those will be our 4 solutions: 0, 0, negative 3, and 3. So of course you only have to write 0 once, but just let you know that that's where the fourth solution went. All right, questions on that one. So we still notice what we're doing here is still setting one side equal to 0 and factoring, even though we're getting more than just the two solutions that we would receive from the quadratic equation. All right. Next one, I think this one, let's see what the next one after this is. Sorry about that. Trying to see if we want to stop right here. That'd be a good place to stop. Yeah, that'd be a good place to stop. Okay. So this is our last one for today. So we have x cubed plus x squared equal to 4x plus 4. So just like before, we're gonna set one side equal to 0. We have whenever we have a situation like this, a scenario like whether it be x to the third power being our highest power, the 3 being the highest power, we have a cubic equation here. Before we had 4 being the highest power. So you want to set one side equal to 0 and see if it's possible to factor and see if that can lead you to solving your equation. So this scenario, x cubed plus x squared equal to 4x plus 4. I'm going to set one side equal to 0. So 4x and negative 4x, 4 and negative 4 will cancel. And that'll leave us with x cubed plus x squared minus 4x minus 4 equal to 0. So none of those were like terms. So we couldn't simplify it any. We just have 4 terms on one side of the equation now. And then we could factor by grouping. Whenever we have 4 more terms, we factor by grouping. So group together the first 2 and group together the second 2. If that doesn't work out, you can always move things around to see if moving terms around will work out better for you. In this case, we'll be all right. And in most cases, that will work out fine for you. So notice what we did here. We factored out our greatest common factor out of each. So in the first set of parentheses, we factored out x squared. Second set of parentheses, we factored out negative 4. Oh, also, I didn't mention, whenever we have a negative or minus that's in front of that third term, make sure you include it inside of the parentheses. When you take that 4x into the parentheses, make sure that's negative 4x. You don't want to separate that 4 from that minus sign. So once again, in this first parentheses, we factored out x squared. In the second parentheses, we factored out negative 4. And that leaves us with x plus 1 in our parentheses. So when you get to this step, x plus 1 has to be in both sets of parentheses, or somewhere you it would not necessarily went wrong, you just can't go any further. You know, if your factorization doesn't bring you to the point where what's in the parentheses are both the same, then you can't go any further, because what's going to happen now is that you're going to factor the x plus 1 to the front, and then you're left with x squared minus 4 in the remaining parentheses. Then x squared minus 4, difference of squares. So that factors out to give us x plus 2, x minus 2. Set each part equal to 0. X plus 1 equal to 0, x plus 2 equal to 0, x minus 2 equal to 0. And that will give us our 3 solutions of x equal to negative 1, negative 2, and positive 2. All right. Questions? Any questions? All right. Let's see, it's 628. Let's look at this next one. I guess that's a good place to stop. Okay, so I guess we'll stop right there. Still got 20 minutes though. Now y'all don't want me to leave with 20 minutes. That's too early, right? So that means next class we'll be looking at the rest of 1.6 and possibly some of 1.7. Just depends on we can get through it. And that is it for chapter 1. So what we're going to do is, I know for a fact your first test is going to be in my math lab. So I got to look and see if I posted that for you guys or not. So don't forget when you get into that first test, I need your scratch work. So make sure you send me a copy of your scratch work so that I can put you down. Or that'll just be, your evidence for doing it and everything like that. So make sure you do that for that test. So any test you do, you always want to send me your scratch work. All right. So any questions or concerns before we close out today? Everybody good? Everybody straight? All right. So make sure you get into my math lab. Of course, we had, like I said, 20 minutes left, so I could, push it. I'm trying not to, trying to give you guys a chance to digest and be able to knock this stuff out, give you a chance to do so. So take advantage of it. And so we're in 1.6 now. So make sure you guys are, trying to stay up according to the lecture, and then we'll go from there. So if you guys are good, I'm good. I will see you on next class. Have a good one.